It's super interesting because Gum and Oreo could not be more different in terms of their struggles and their kind of positions as brands. But where Oreo has all the momentum in the world, and especially at the pandemic, I think Gus, kind of similar to what you were saying, looking for those comfort brands, it was one of the brands that people really flocked to, and we really saw mass droves of huge amounts of consumption as a part of that. But gum, as I mentioned, we had headwinds as a category even before the pandemic. And then with the pandemic, it was really heightened by social interactions being limited. And so what that really meant for the brand is, how do you think about other ways, other reasons for people to chew? And if you kind of know the history of the category, it's a category that has really faced declines for over a decade. And it's partly different behaviors, it's partly industry behaviors as a result of consolidation, it's partly that young generations were never recruited into the chewing category, because when those declines were happening 10 years ago, they were young children. So if you think about, a young child having an experience with Bazooka or Bubblicious, those things started to happen less and less. With the younger, like millennials and Gen Z, those people were never recruited into chewing. And so thinking about how you overcome, this existing kind of behavioral headwind and trying to get people reinterested in this thing that has never been a habit for them, what do you do? How do you find ways in? And then on top of that, the one reason they would have had this habit would have been the social interaction and breath freshening that they no longer have as a reason. So how do you find alternate ways to be able to get people back interested in the category? And that actually landed us in a place where we really pivoted the positioning of the brand entirely. So before, there had been a couple of different positionings the brand had really been in, and the most recent was all about kind of flavor and sort of like having gum as a distraction, as well as some freshening benefits. There had been a legacy of the brand with oral care. I'm sure everybody knows the 4 out of 5 dentists. That had been a big piece of the brand's heritage. And so how do you evolve that and meet a new need? And so one thing that we saw both pre and post pandemic is stress and tension had continued to increase as an issue in people's lives. And this was a consumer need that people needed to sort of have a moment to be able to bring them out of that and bring them back into the moment. And actually, Gen Z is one of the most stressed generations of all time. And it has a lot to do with the fact that we have a 24-hour news cycle. They're always on social media. They're the first generation ever that has a completely digital first life. And they also are the first generation ever where their parents may or may not have been a part of that as well. So it's also different for can't think of which they would be, I guess, Gen X parents, and how they parent Gen Z has also compiled to the stress of Gen Zers. And so thinking about how you reach this group that has never formed the habit, how do you really provide meaning where they need it? And so what we realize is that people subconsciously actually chew when they're stressed out. So if you ever borrow a pen from me, I am like the poster child for this. I definitely am the person that chews the pen cap. And it's actually a really psychological truth in that you do tend to chew or clench your jaw when you're stressed. And so there's something that happens in the mouth when you are stressed out. And so thinking about that insight, how do you then help that to become a benefit? And so what we started to think about was the benefit of chew, and just chewing for the sake of chewing, because it helps to relieve the tension. It helps to relax your jaw, which then physically helps you to relax. And so that's the place we pivoted into as a brand. And it's relatively new. We did launch it right before the pandemic. And we actually launched it with this huge experiential crowd of people when you could do that, which is so foreign, it feels like now, even though it was just, a little over a year ago. But so we launched it as people were kind of leaving their commutes, and most stressed out moment is commutes. And so we launched in this really big experiential way and have continued that through the pandemic with more relevant messaging related to being at home or studying or work from home sort of situations, or school from home situations.